This is Manchester, a city known for its great music, its politics, and its amazing culture.
See, Manchester has just under 130,000 young people living here, in working class towns and communities across the region, many of whom have bore the weight of austerity for over a decade now. The neoliberal promotions of individualistic, privatised and competitive values also delegitimised a collective pursuit of shared goals because such collectives that exist are seen as obstructing market freedoms, inadvertently dismantling communities to generate the most wealth. As a result of austerity, many communities have suffered directly as a result, with essential community services being scarce due to financial difficulties. One organisation who saw this and decided to build within their own community is 0161 Community. 0161 Community have been about for the last 3 years. They rely entirely on donations whenever their volunteers can pitch in. They provide a number of key services in local communities in both Greater Manchester and Huddersfield, such as kids boxing classes, community fun days, community dinners, all in an effort to build closer community cohesion. I spoke with Joe, the main coordinator at 0161 Community, at one of his temporary gyms he had set up in Islington Mill in Salford. I wanted to find out more about the group and why it was started.
One Community started a year and a half ago for me and a friend of mine who works at Curzon Ashton, realising that people, especially kids and young people, don't really have anything to do anymore, and as youth services get cut more and more and more, that actually there's a massive gap, and not only do people spend too much time playing indoors or playing on video games, but also that people are getting involved in crime or in activities that they shouldn't really be, running drugs across county lines or stabbings or any kind of criminal activity from the ages of from 9, 10, 11 years old now. And we realised after looking at what other groups had done in the past, or we did a couple of football tournaments, and after a while what you can see very quickly is that the one or the two things that are most likely to bring people together, or that most likely engage as many people as possible, is art and sport as the two things. So sport and art were the two things that we worked on together to build community in working class areas, especially areas that have been divided historically for many years for a variety of different reasons, and that at a time where we're being done over by the state or we're being done over by the government, that we shouldn't be picking on each other, we shouldn't be divided or hating on each other or different people from where they come from or what they look like, but actually that we're all being done over by the same people, and that at a time where people are being driven to a more individualistic way of life, that we should be doing activities together, we should be learning more about each other and doing things together and giving people an opportunity that actually takes them away from either being on the street or playing video games, doing things together and meeting people from the local community and doing things in the local community together, and to actually know that we can take control of our own communities and that we don't need to rely on the government to do things for us, and that by us all working together we can unite, learn new skills, become more confident in the things that we do, and then move forward doing things like that. Yeah, so Islington Mill, we came here through a very, very different project, and basically got in touch and said that as 0161 Community, we do loads of different activities, and we're very lucky to be able to do activities in Oldham, in Ashton, in Salford, done some in South Manchester, in the city centre, but the biggest thing is that we don't have a base. So, we work in a lot of libraries or in a lot of social centres.
Not having a space is crucial at the moment. This is something Rab, Joe's friend of Madison Curzon, talks about on the 0161 Community podcast.
Yeah, but I put it solely down to a lack of access to services, or barriers being put up to stop people accessing services, whether it's financial or whether it's about infrastructure or whatever. Do you know what I mean? There's loads of mitigating factors to stop people being able to access services, and what James was speaking about there is pivotal in changing that stat from Sport England. It's about people doing it for themselves,
Crime and becoming a product of the society that surrounds him. Last year, the Ministry of Justice report into youth justice statistics showed that there were just over 60,000 children arrested in the UK. Of those arrested, 19,316 were sentenced at court, either to community sentences or custodial sentences. This report also states that the average custodial sentence given to a child has increased from the previous year from 11.4 months to 17.7 months, with the number of children being held in custody increasing since the previous year. This is something James, another 0161 community volunteer, briefly touches upon in the 0161 community podcast. He talks about being able to steer children down the right path.
And it's that friendly level of competitions, obviously all based on community and family. They all know each other from the estates. The woman who runs the church knows all the families personally, knows all the parents personally. We've started to develop some really good personal relationships. We had one young lad who didn't turn up for a few weeks, which was really strange. He was bang into it and seemed really, really keen. We had a chat with the people from the church, and they say he was hanging around with some kids who weren't particularly behaving that well, and could see himself going down a dodgy path. And because we had that level of trust with them, because he knew that we weren't turning up to get something from them, we were turning up to give them something. We had a chat with that kid, and within a couple of weeks he was back doing it regularly. Wasn't hanging around with these kids that he was before. So that it's like a preventative measure as well. We can get places where and have chats with people that they might not have with family members or teachers from school, and you can kind of have that sort of big brother relationship with them where they can speak to you about things and you have a chat with them.
This comes at a time when youth services are struggling to survive. Across the UK, more than 3,500 youth worker staff have lost their jobs through the closure of over 600 youth clubs due to austerity measures that were implemented in 2010. Of these 3,500 staff, 84% believe there is direct correlation between this and the rise in youth violent crime. I wanted to find out more about the free classes that 0161 community were putting on in the library. So I went to Shatterton Library and spoke to Kelly, who works there, and also Andrew Nesbitt, another 0161 volunteer who teaches boxing classes on Wednesday nights.
My name's Kelly. I work here at Addison Library. I think it's really important for the community. I mean, we've been lucky enough for 0161 to come in and do it, and the guys, it's been essential to get bums off the seats as well, and as well as bringing the community in together. Yeah, we're really grateful for it as well. Demographically, where we come from, we don't get a lot of funding here, and it's good to see that it's all inclusive, and yeah, it's really important because the young people get lost.
Andy, I'm one of the coaches at 0161 Community Gym. So we do boxing, Muay Thai, so yeah, like kind of just martial arts like that generally. Yeah, so I think, I mean, for a start, it's got a little bit of a bad rep, but it does teach like discipline. It teaches teamwork. Teaches kids to, to like aggression, control aggression in like a safe, friendly environment, which I think is better than them being out on the street. And I think the one of the things about 0161 community is it's free for anyone to use, and anyone to come is welcome, which I think is really important. Like obviously, some people don't have the money to commit to a regular gym subscription, so free gyms like this are really important, I think. Yeah, roughly. I mean, so it varies. It can be pretty small, like one-on-one classes, like small groups, or it can be up to like 15 to 20 kids, depending on the time of year. I mean, more classes. See the kids get like actually involved in some of the older ones to help out with teaching. I think would be really cool. And then yeah, like a space, I think as well would be good.
Over the course of the last year, I attended numerous 0161 community events that were put on for free. I attended football tournaments, boxing events, and also the community fun days and barbecues. I got to meet some of the regular attendees. This is Lindsay Bessel. She is a mum from Manchester who brings her daughter Grace along to the free events. Grace has attended classes for the last year. I spoke to them to see why they thought 0161 was important. Due to the current COVID-19 pandemic, this interview has been recorded via webcam. You've been there so far. How have they been?
They've been really good. It was quite fun to see, like, to get involved and do stuff. Try like boxing, like you'd never really try out of the thing. Because I know I'd never try boxing, and I've got really into it now because of the community. So it was very fun.
Would you say boxing's more your favourite or art? is your favourite now, the classes?
I'd say boxing was one of my favourite classes because it was more interactive and you could sort of let out a bit of steam. But art was very fun as well.
So this one's for you, Lindsay. Do you think it's beneficial to the community that they're working in, that 0161's there? Like, for example, doing free boxing classes or working with different kids?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant from a parent's perspective. I mean, the stuff they did in Salford over the summer holidays was amazing. I was brought up not far from there in Lower Broughton, and there was nothing like that, you know, when I was younger. You know, you only got access to stuff like boxing and activities, you know, if your mum and dad had the money to pay for you to go. So the fact that it's inclusive and free is just perfect, you know, especially in the holidays when people are struggling.
Does it shock you to know how many youth clubs and youth workers have lost their job over the last 10 years since the Conservatives have been in power?
I think it's absolutely disgraceful and impacts communities massively. And a lot of the youth clubs that my older son is now 22 years were subsidised, so such as Sure Start. My son also has a disability, so he had to have one-to-one when he went to any activities. And with council-run youth clubs, they provided that, you know, one-to-one support. And as he was getting older and these facilities were closing down, it massively impacted his own life because, you know, we couldn't get him in anywhere because every council youth club was shutting down. So he missed out massively, you know, coming to like teenage years, you know, when the Tories started cutting massively due to austerity. And now, you know, Grace is 13. You know, there's just nothing at all, nothing where we live.
So, see when 0161 community are in different communities like Salford and Oldham, do you think then they create greater community cohesion in working class communities?
Yeah, the ones we've been to, especially during the summer when it was like a community meal and people brought food and people from the community came and ate together, you know, and it was all free, you know, they didn't have to bring anything. And people were actually talking to people from the next street who they'd never spoken to before. And I remember speaking to a young family at Islington Mill, and they told me that their community club, what they used to use, was now being used by developers where builders are going to have their lunch. So they couldn't even use their own community centre because it was now being used for something completely different. It's just disgusting.
Do you think the same, Chris, of your age group and that generation? Do you think there's a lot of youth clubs and stuff that's just not around, or there should be more?
I think that I don't really go to any youth clubs because there's not really any around in my community anyway. I know that in my school there's not a lot of people who go to like community clubs because there's not really, you have to travel and a lot of people, like the mum and dads don't have cars, or the cars are being used, so they can't go to these youth clubs because there's none in our community anywhere.
I think seeing that the impact that they've had on families and young people, you know, in the work that they're already doing, and you know, taking my own daughter and being part of the you know, community meals and stuff like that, you know, benefits people massively and really brings people together. And you know, there was an occasion where everyone just started playing football. You know, parents, grandparents, kids, people from 0161 community, and you just don't see that anymore. And you know, the kids are going home, you know, happy with great memories of, you know, something that they've done with their own families and people who live round the corner or on the next estate who they've never spoken to before. And that's massive. We need more of it. We definitely need more of it. You know, we've got increase in youth crime, knife crime. you know, these things should be the law, that they should be, you know, embedded in every single community. So yeah, give them every bit of funding that's available. They're invaluable.
Much of this can be traced back to 2011, when then Prime Minister David Cameron introduced Big Society, a policy that would only apply to English domestic policy. This may all sound familiar, a network of volunteers out helping the community. That's because it has been done before by David Cameron in 2011 in what he called the National Citizen Service.
The Big Society is about a huge culture change where people in their everyday lives, in their homes, in their neighbourhoods, in their workplaces, don't always turn to officials, local authorities or central government for answers to the problems they face, but instead feel both free and powerful enough to help themselves and their own communities.
With cuts in the state funding to the voluntary sector estimated early as 2010 between 3.2 and 5.1 billion, many of the organisations on which Cameron was dependent on, assuming they still even existed, had reduced capacity just to meet their demand. With something as important to the Prime Minister David Cameron as the National Citizen Service to survive and meet numbers, not only did the state again promise billions in funding, but it also did exactly what it consistently refused to do for local authorities and youth services. I spoke with Eddie Redmond, an ex-youth worker in Manchester who's now a trade unionist. I wanted to find out more about job losses and how that would affect the community.
These figures don't reflect the true assault on the youth provision. The figures come from a Unison survey published on the 3rd of December 2008. This report shows the cuts from 2012. The Tories have plundered the youth service since 2010. 400 million has been cut from the youth service budget. The question to ask regarding that survey is, are these full-time posts or are they full-time equivalent posts? One of the centres I worked in was you had one full-time worker and you had 10 part-time staff on 6 or 9 hours each. So that resulted in one full-time worker losing the post and 9 part-time staff, and all of those were local women as well. So that had a double effect. It had an effect on the working capacity of women within the community and also the provision. Voluntary provision are still not. They talk about the youth clubs being 600 youth clubs being closed. It's fair to say that the councils try to keep the buildings open, say 10% of the time by voluntary provision. So the true impact of that is probably 600 youth clubs being closed, but a far higher percentage of that working at say 10% of the capacity in the local communities. That hides the greater part of the assault on working class areas under the Tories, really.
You talk about that sort of reduction, the working at 10% capacity. As an ex-youth worker yourself, how do you see that affecting the local community and youth in that area?
I'll give you an example of one of the centres that I worked in. When the Tories came to power in 2010, one of the clubs I worked in, these were the opening nights that it had. It was open 4 nights a week from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m, 2 nights a week from 5 p.m. till 7 p.m, and 1 night a week, 9 p.m. The daytime sessions were 3 days. It was open from 12 till 3. And in that, there was a drop-in sessions with a designated connections worker linked up to a college. There was a smoking cessation worker, a teenage pregnancy worker, a wellbeing worker regarding mental health, focusing on particularly on young people, an alcohol drugs worker, and there was 3 part-time staff who worked on life and social skills, focusing on numeracy and literary issues. The centre did 6 residential weekends away a year. And it was linked up with youth provision on every day, and that now does not exist at all. So you've taken all those kind of wraparound services that were available for young people to focus on them to take them out of, as they used to call it, NEET, not in education, employment or training, take them out of that space and direct them into colleges, into work roles and stuff like that. None of that is available anymore. So anybody with half a mind could look at those statistics and see there's been a massive gap in provision taken out of working class areas.
So see that gap in provision then, there's, as you know yourself, there's volunteers that are sort of following that space as well as they can within youth services or just doing things for the local community. And one of those community groups is the 161 community. Do you think groups like the 161 community are beneficial to the community that they work in?
Yeah, I think very much so. I think 061 community are stepping into a totally created void. There is no profit to be made, and only hard work trying to replace the well-funded service with too few volunteers. You know, they've got next to no financial support. They're putting on projects that provide much needed resources to young people, young people's development and the sustainability of local communities, and that they are a must. They are a much needed resource.
So where did it all go wrong for the big society? It's argued that first off, funding was never given to the most disadvantaged areas. The big society wasn't mentioned in public after 2013. Following this, the National Audit Office had found that there had been an improper allocation of funds, and it wasn't until 2017 that Cameron had finally admitted his failings. Since 2013, there hasn't been any public acknowledgement of the initiative until 2017, when David Cameron finally admitted his failings. The main criticism from the plan arose when it was argued that the big society wasn't equipped to help the most disadvantaged communities within England, while our welfare communities were the ones who benefited the most. This has left community groups such as 0161 Community feeling that they have to pick up the slack along the way. In contrast to the big society, it's actually the people on the ground who are empowering the communities rather than the power being taken away from the government. All this in an effort to create a better Manchester for the future, through creating stronger bonds within working class communities. Unless something changes in the future, many of these communities are left feeling isolated with a strive to make it on their own.